Apparently, finding your husband sneaking out of the building across the street isn't what they mean by neighborhood watch, more like neighborhood what you doing with my life. That's how my Tuesday night in late October kicked off, not with a pumpkin spice latte and a Hallmark movie, but with a full-blown existential crisis viewed through my kitchen window. It was 2:17 a.m. The streetlights of Maple Creek, Illinois, cast long, dramatic shadows, perfect for a noir film, or, my husband, Baxter Graham, making his grand exit from the sleek, modern condo building directly opposite our perfectly manicured lawn. He was doing his best impression of a ninja, all dark clothes, hushed movements, and a furtive glance over his shoulder. Except ninjas usually have a more honorable mission than a clandestine rendezvous. My first thought wasn't, "Oh, my poor husband, what trouble is he in?" It was, "Seriously, Baxter, you couldn't spring for a hotel a few towns over? The commute is practically a walk of shame." For weeks I'd been noticing the little things, the faint scent of a different perfume on his collar. Not cloying, but subtly floral, like a high-end air freshener for a woman who thought she was too classy for cheap thrills. The late-night work calls that always seemed to take him to the garage, his voice hushed, the garage door conveniently closed, the way he'd suddenly become obsessed with his phone, guarding it like it held the nuclear launch codes, or more likely, a very incriminating text message. "I'm Stella Graham, 38, a freelance graphic designer, and my superpower isn't creating stunning logos. It's noticing patterns." And Baxter, my husband of 12 years, was a walking, talking pattern of deception. The first time I saw him, it was a blur, a shadow detaching itself from the condo building's entrance, slipping into the pre-dawn gloom. I dismissed it as insomnia playing tricks, or maybe a neighbor who just happened to look like my husband. The second time, a week later, I was up early for a client deadline, nursing a cup of coffee, and there he was again, a little less ninja, a little more man trying to avoid a speed camera. He even had that telltale, "I just did something I shouldn't have" swagger, a mix of relief and lingering guilt. That's when the little voice in my head, the one that usually critiques bad fonts, started screaming, "Stella, honey, your husband is having an affair, and it's happening right across the street." I wasn't heartbroken, not immediately. More like utterly, spectacularly annoyed. My life, which I'd meticulously designed to be a tasteful blend of suburban comfort and creative freedom, was suddenly a B-movie plot twist. And Baxter, my 40-year-old senior marketing manager at Sterling Innovations, was starring in it as the clueless philanderer. It wasn't a gut punch. It was more like a slow, agonizing paper cut across my carefully curated existence. Who was this woman, bold enough to set up shop practically within binoculars' reach of our master bedroom? And more importantly, how utterly basic was Baxter to choose someone so close to home? Did he think I was blind? Or just too busy color-coding my pantry to notice his nocturnal escapades? The sheer audacity of it was almost admirable. Almost. The third sighting sealed the deal. This time, I was ready. I had my phone, zoomed in, and caught him clear as day, adjusting his tie, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips as he exited the building. He looked like he'd just closed a major deal, not just, closed someone else's wife. My initial indignation quickly morphed into a cold, calculating curiosity. This wasn't just about Baxter anymore. This was about the audacity of the other woman. Who was she? What kind of person thinks it's a good idea to conduct an affair with a married man literally across the street from his home? Was she new to town? Some desperate housewife? Or perhaps a woman with a serious lack of imagination for clandestine locations? That morning, as Baxter walked in, whistling a tune I didn't recognize, smelling faintly of a shower gel that definitely wasn't ours, I simply smiled. A tight, sweet smile that promised nothing but delivered everything. "Rough night at the office, honey?" I asked, my voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that could curdle milk. He mumbled something about a late project, a client emergency. I nodded, pretending to believe him, while my mind was already racing, connecting the dots. The condo building across the street wasn't just any building. It was the Maple Creek Towers, notorious for its high-end units and, more importantly, its residents. And suddenly a name, a familiar, slightly irritating name, clicked into place. A name that made my blood run cold, then boil with a mix of fury and a perverse sense of dark humor. This wasn't just some random fling. This was a direct, calculated insult. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was cheating with her. And the thought, the sheer, unadulterated gall of it, made me realize one thing. This wasn't going to be a tearful confrontation. This was going to be a masterclass in strategic retribution. Because when life hands you lemons, you don't just make lemonade. You weaponize the citrus. The question wasn't if I would get my revenge, but how I would make it so exquisitely painful, so utterly public, that it would become the stuff of Maple Creek legend. And believe me, in this town, legends are born from less. The revelation hit me like a rogue shopping cart in a crowded Costco. The woman living in that condo, the one hosting Baxter's late-night excursions, was Joan Albright. Joan, as in Joan Albright, the legendary queen of Maple Creek High's class of '01, now director of marketing at Sterling Innovations, and, oh right, Baxter's boss. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor, casting me, Stella Graham, as the unsuspecting wife in a rom-com gone horribly wrong, where the other woman was a relic from high school glory days. It wasn't just an affair. It was a power play, a suburban soap opera with a corporate twist. And suddenly, my quiet, creative life felt like a reality show I never auditioned for, but was now forced to executive produce. My first instinct wasn't to scream or cry or even key Joan's Lexus. It was to laugh, a dark, guttural laugh that would have made a hyena proud. Joan Albright, the woman who peaked in high school, still dining out on stories of her prom queen reign, now dining out on my husband. The irony was so thick, you could spread it on a cracker. I remembered Joan from our brief, awkward encounters at company holiday parties. All perfectly coiffed hair, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and a condescending air that suggested she was doing us all a favor by breathing the same air. She always treated Baxter with a proprietary air, a subtle possessiveness I'd dismissed as a boss thing. Turns out it was just a boss sleeping with my husband thing. The next few days were a masterclass in emotional compartmentalization. By day, I was Stella, the calm, collected freelance graphic designer, hitting deadlines, perfecting color palettes. By night, I was Stella, the suburban spy, meticulously documenting Baxter's increasingly blatant transgressions. He'd started making excuses to work late at the office, which, given Joan lived across the street, was a rather transparent lie. "Big project, honey," he'd mumble, smelling faintly of Joan's expensive perfume and a hint of office coffee. I'd nod, offering him a perfectly innocent "good luck, sweetie," while mentally sketching out a flowchart of his lies. My covert ops involved a surprising amount of mundane activity. I'd forget my phone in the car and accidentally catch him texting Joan, her name a glaring beacon in his notifications. I'd randomly check our shared credit card statements and find suspicious charges for client dinners at upscale restaurants I knew Joan favored, always on nights Baxter was supposedly working late. The man was a walking, talking cliché, and it was almost insulting how little effort he put into his deception. Did he truly believe I was that oblivious? Or perhaps, in his deluded mind, he thought I was just another piece of furniture, easily overlooked. The microaggressions from Baxter became almost comical. He'd criticize my cooking, which he'd praised for 12 years, suddenly developing a refined palate for gourmet takeout. He'd complain about the clutter, despite our house being impeccably organized, clearly comparing it to Joan's minimalist condo. One evening, he even suggested I update my wardrobe, a subtle jab that reeked of Joan's influence. "You know, Stella," he'd said, eyeing my comfortable but stylish loungewear, "Joan always looks so put together, even at the office." I just smiled, a little wider this time. "Oh, I'm sure she does, Baxter. It must be exhausting to maintain that level of perfection. Good thing I'm not trying to impress my boss." The subtext, of course, was a venomous whisper. "Unlike you, you pathetic worm." I started confiding in my best friend, Sarah Jenkins, a fellow freelance graphic designer with a wit as sharp as her design skills. "So, my husband's having an affair?" I casually dropped during our weekly coffee date at the local Starbucks, watching her nearly choke on her latte. "And get this, it's with Joan Albright." Sarah's eyes widened to the size of dinner plates. "Joan Albright? The prom queen? The one who looks like she bathes in Botox and ambition?" I nodded. "The very same." Apparently, Baxter has a thing for women who peaked in OI1. We dissolved into a fit of giggles, the kind that only comes from shared outrage and a healthy dose of schadenfreude. Sarah, ever the pragmatist, immediately offered to help me gather intel. "Consider me your cue, Stella," she declared. "But instead of gadgets, I'll bring the gossip and the moral support." My other source of intel was Emily Rodriguez, my neighbor, a stay-at-home mom whose social calendar revolved around PTA meetings and neighborhood block parties. Emily knew everything. A casual chat over the fence about new people moving into the Maple Creek Towers quickly turned into a gold mine. "Oh, you mean Joan Albright?" Emily chirped, oblivious to my internal turmoil. "She's always been a bit much, hasn't she? Heard she's been working late a lot lately, even on weekends." Poor Baxter, always stuck at the office with her. The irony was so thick I could practically taste it. Emily, bless her heart, was unknowingly providing me with the perfect alibi for Baxter's nocturnal activities, solidifying the narrative of dedicated employee for the unsuspecting public. The indignation simmered, but it never boiled over into a messy emotional outburst. Instead, it fueled a cold, precise anger. I wasn't just angry at Baxter for his betrayal. I was furious at Joan for her blatant disregard for boundaries, for her predatory behavior, and for making my life a cheap imitation of a Lifetime movie. This wasn't just about my marriage. It was about respect, about dignity, and about proving that a woman who seemed invisible could become a force of nature when pushed too far. I knew I couldn't confront them directly. That would be messy, undignified, and frankly, not my style. My style was surgical. My style was subtle. My style was to make them regret the day they ever thought they could pull a fast one on Stella Graham. One evening, as Baxter was working late again, I found an old photo album. There was a picture of him and Joan from a company picnic a few years back. She was leaning into him, a little too close, a little too familiar even then. My gut clenched. This wasn't a sudden, impulsive affair. This had been brewing, simmering, a slow cooker of infidelity. That picture, combined with the texts, the credit card statements, and my eyewitness accounts, solidified my resolve. I had enough to make a case, not just for divorce, but for a public reckoning. And the best part? They had no idea I knew. Their smug, self-satisfied bubble was about to burst, and I was holding the pin. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the curtain was about to rise on a performance they'd never forget. The turning point wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a tearful confession. It was a mundane email. Baxter, in a moment of utter carelessness, forwarded a work-related attachment to my personal email, forgetting our accounts were linked for shared family documents. Buried deep within the chain, beneath layers of corporate jargon and marketing strategies, was an email from Joan to Baxter. It wasn't explicit, not overtly sexual, but it was far more damning. It referenced a private meeting at her condo, a special project they were working on, and then a casual aside. "Don't forget the client dinner next week. Same place, same time, just us." The client dinner was a blatant lie. The attached calendar invite showed it as a recurring personal appointment in Joan's private calendar. But the real kicker? The subject line of Joan's email was, "Our little secret, Q4 strategy." And attached to that email was a spreadsheet detailing a suspicious reallocation of marketing funds, signed off by Joan, with Baxter's name conspicuously absent from the approval chain, yet clearly involved in the execution. This wasn't just an affair anymore. This was corporate malfeasance. Joan, as director of marketing, was using company resources, possibly even company time, to facilitate their trysts, and, potentially, to benefit herself financially. And Baxter, my supposedly upright husband, was complicit. My blood ran cold, then hot. This wasn't just about my marriage. This was about ethics, about integrity, and about a blatant abuse of power. The humor suddenly took a darker, more satisfying turn. This wasn't just a domestic squabble, this was a corporate scandal waiting to happen. And I, Stella Graham, freelance graphic designer, was about to become its unlikely whistleblower. The discovery recontextualized everything. Their late nights weren't just for canoodling. They were for clandestine meetings that might have involved more than just pillow talk. The client dinners weren't just a cover for their affair. They were potentially a cover for something far more illicit. Baxter wasn't just a cheating husband. He was a potentially compromised employee, entangled in his boss's questionable dealings. And Joan? She wasn't just a predatory boss. She was a reckless executive, blurring the lines between personal and professional in a way that could bring down not just her career, but potentially Baxter's too. My intelligence, which Baxter had so casually dismissed, now became my most potent weapon. I spent the next few days meticulously archiving every piece of digital evidence. Screenshots of texts, copies of emails, the suspicious credit card statements, even the metadata from the photos I'd snapped of Baxter leaving Joan's condo. I created a secure encrypted folder, a digital dossier of their indiscretions, both personal and professional. My graphic design skills, usually employed for branding and marketing, were now repurposed for strategic information warfare. I even created a timeline, a visual narrative of their affair, cross-referencing dates and times with Baxter's work commitments and Joan's business trips. The precision was almost artistic. I subtly probed Sarah and Emily for more information, framing it as general office gossip or neighborhood chatter. Sarah, with her network of industry contacts, confirmed rumors of Joan's aggressive management style and a few whispers about her unorthodox financial decisions. Emily, ever the social butterfly, mentioned Joan had recently purchased a new luxury car, way out of her usual pay grade, and was renovating her condo with designer everything. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture of a woman who was living beyond her means, and perhaps using her position to fund it. The humor in this phase was a gallows humor, a dark amusement at the sheer idiocy of my adversaries. They thought they were so clever, so discreet, operating under the cloak of corporate legitimacy. But they had underestimated the woman who could spot a pixel out of place from a mile away. I even started practicing my innocent bystander face in the mirror, perfecting the look of mild surprise and concern that I would deploy when their world inevitably imploded. "Oh dear," I'd murmur to my reflection. Who could have possibly done such a thing? My plan began to crystallize. A direct confrontation was still out. It would devolve into a shouting match, accusations, and denials. No, this required finesse. This required a public forum, a stage where their carefully constructed facades would crumble under the weight of irrefutable evidence. And what better stage than their own corporate environment? The very place where Joan wielded her power, where Baxter sought her approval. It was poetic justice, served ice cold. I started researching corporate HR policies, specifically those regarding workplace relationships, conflicts of interest, and the misuse of company resources. Sterling Innovations, like most large corporations, had strict guidelines. A relationship between a manager and a subordinate was a clear violation, especially if it involved a financial element or the misuse of company assets. The HR department, led by the stoic Mr. Henderson, was known for its adherence to protocol. They wouldn't tolerate this. The anticipation was a delicious, slow burn. I imagined Joan's perfectly coiffed hair coming undone, Baxter's smug expression dissolving into panicked confusion. I wasn't seeking revenge out of malice, not entirely. I was seeking justice, a rebalancing of the scales. They had taken my peace, my trust, and my dignity. I was simply returning the favor, with interest. The final piece of my puzzle fell into place when I learned about Sterling Innovations' annual Q4 Strategy Review meeting. It was a mandatory all-hands-on-deck event, attended by every department head, senior manager, and a significant portion of the general staff. It was the perfect stage. Not too intimate, not too public, but just public enough to ensure maximum impact and minimum plausible deniability. It was the kind of event where everyone was present, everyone was paying attention, and everyone would remember what happened. I spent hours crafting the anonymous email, ensuring it was untraceable, professional, and devastatingly effective. It wasn't an emotional rant. It was a concise, factual presentation of evidence, complete with timestamps, screenshots, and a clear explanation of the HR policy violations. I even included a link to the suspicious financial spreadsheet, highlighting the questionable allocations. The email would be sent to 2 key recipients: Mr. Henderson, the HR director, and, for maximum social impact, the entire Sterling Innovations Happy Hour group chat, a notoriously active and gossipy channel. As I prepared the final draft, a wave of calm washed over me. This wasn't about anger anymore. It was about empowerment. They had underestimated me, the quiet graphic designer who preferred her design software to corporate politics. They thought I was just a wife, easily replaced, easily ignored, but they were about to learn that sometimes the quiet ones are the most observant and the most dangerous. The stage was set, the evidence was compiled, and the digital clock was ticking down to the moment of truth. My revenge wasn't going to be loud. It was going to be an elegant surgical strike, leaving them with nothing but the echoes of their own foolishness. The day of Sterling Innovations' Q4 strategy review dawned crisp and cold, a perfect reflection of my mood. I wasn't nervous. I was exhilarated. Baxter, oblivious, had left for the office early, whistling a jaunty tune, probably anticipating another special project with Joan. Little did he know, his special project was about to become a very public spectacle. I, on the other hand, was enjoying a leisurely brunch with Sarah, sipping mimosas and discussing the finer points of digital anonymity. "Are you sure this is foolproof?" Sarah asked, her eyes sparkling with a mix of concern and anticipation. "As foolproof as a digital paper trail can be," I replied, a smirk playing on my lips. "I've scrubbed every metadata tag, used a VPN, and routed it through enough proxy servers to make the NSA dizzy. Besides, the evidence speaks for itself." The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. At precisely 9:55 a.m., from the comfort of my home office, I hit send. The anonymous email, a perfectly crafted dossier of betrayal and corporate malfeasance, winged its way to Mr. Henderson's inbox and, simultaneously, to the entire Sterling Innovations Happy Hour group chat. I imagined the collective gasp, the sudden silence, the frantic scrolling. It was a digital mic drop, a perfectly timed explosion in the heart of their carefully constructed corporate facade. I pictured the scene. Joan, impeccably dressed, probably basking in the glow of her perceived power, ready to deliver her Q4 projections. Baxter, sitting a few rows back, trying to look engaged, perhaps sending a furtive text under the table. Then, the ping. Not one, but dozens of pings, as phones buzzed and screens lit up. Mr. Henderson, ever the professional, would likely open his email first, his brow furrowing as he read the damning evidence. The happy hour chat, however, would be pure, unadulterated chaos. My internal monologue was a running commentary of cruel amusement. "Oh, look, Baxter, your work trips just got a public review. And Joan, honey, that special project just got a company-wide audience." The beauty of it was the sheer, unadulterated humiliation. This wasn't just a private affair. It was a public exposure, a professional scandal that would reverberate through the hallowed halls of Sterling Innovations. The first call came an hour later. It was Sarah. "Stella, you won't believe it. My contact at Sterling just messaged me. Total dumpster fire. Joan and Baxter were pulled out of the meeting mid-presentation. Mr. Henderson looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. The happy hour chat is absolutely melting down." I allowed myself a small, satisfied smile. "Excellent. Sounds like my little strategy review went off without a hitch." The consequences were swift and devastating. Within hours, the office grapevine was buzzing. Joan Albright, the untouchable prom queen, was escorted out of the building by HR, her face a mask of furious disbelief. The whispers were rampant. Misuse of company funds, unethical conduct, workplace affair. Baxter, my dear clueless Baxter, was suspended pending an internal investigation. He called me later that day, his voice a panicked, high-pitched whine. "Stella, what did you do? My career is over. Joan is blaming me for everything." I feigned ignorance, my voice dripping with saccharine concern. "Oh, Baxter, honey, what are you talking about? I've been home all day, working on client projects. Is everything all right at the office? You sound like you've seen a ghost." The gaslighting was exquisite, a mirror image of his own tactics. He sputtered, he stammered, he tried to accuse me, but he had no proof. Just a gut feeling that his invisible wife had somehow orchestrated his downfall. The social fallout was equally brutal. Emily, my neighborhood intel, called, practically vibrating with excitement. "Stella, you will not believe the gossip. Joan Albright? Apparently she was having an affair with Baxter, and they were using company money. Can you believe the nerve?" I played the role of the shocked, sympathetic wife perfectly. "Oh, Emily, no. Baxter? My Baxter? I had no idea. I mean, he was working so hard, always late at the office." Emily, bless her heart, immediately launched into a tirade against Joan, painting her as the manipulative villain, while I, the poor, unsuspecting wife, garnered all the sympathy. It was a masterclass in narrative control. The next few weeks were a blur of legal consultations and divorce papers. Baxter, stripped of his job and his dignity, was a shell of his former self. He tried to fight for assets, but my meticulously compiled evidence, particularly the financial irregularities, gave me a significant upper hand. His lawyers advised him to settle quickly, quietly, and with as little fuss as possible. Joan, facing a potential lawsuit from Sterling Innovations for financial misconduct, also found her career in tatters. Her prom queen status was now a punchline, her reputation irrevocably stained. The irony was palpable. The woman who built her empire on appearances had it crumble due to her own lack of discretion. One evening, Sarah and I raised a toast. "To exposing scandals during business hours," I declared, clinking my glass against hers. The satisfaction was profound, a deep, resonant hum of vindication. This wasn't just about getting even. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about proving that even the quietest person can wield immense power when pushed to their limits. Baxter and Joan had underestimated me, assuming my domestic life precluded any strategic intelligence. They learned the hard way that a graphic designer knows a thing or two about crafting a compelling message, and sometimes that message is a very public, very humiliating exposé. The world had shifted, and I, Stella Graham, was standing firmly on the other side, ready for my next act. Life after Baxter and Joan became a surprisingly peaceful, if slightly chaotic, blank canvas. The divorce was finalized with a speed that suggested Baxter was more eager to escape the public eye than to cling to our shared assets. I kept the house in Maple Creek, a symbolic victory, and a tangible reminder that I wasn't the one who had to start over from scratch in a dingy apartment. Baxter, I heard through the ever-reliable Emily, had moved into a modest condo across town, a far cry from his former upper-middle-class comfort. He was struggling to find new employment, his name now synonymous with workplace scandal, in the tight-knit corporate world of Chicago suburbs. Karma, it seemed, wasn't just a concept. It was a very efficient HR department. Joan Albright, the former prom queen, fared even worse. Sterling Innovations, keen to protect its reputation, pursued legal action for the misuse of funds. She settled, losing not only her job, but a significant portion of her ill-gotten gains. Her luxury car was repossessed, her condo renovation stalled, and her carefully constructed social facade crumbled. The last I heard, she was working as a consultant for a small, obscure firm, a shadow of her former self, a cautionary tale whispered in country club locker rooms. The woman who once commanded attention now merely elicited pity, a fate I found far more satisfying than any outright ruin. Pity, after all, is a slow, agonizing death for an ego. My own life, however, blossomed. The initial shock and indignation had given way to a profound sense of liberation. I no longer had to pretend, to ignore the subtle shifts in Baxter's behavior, or to live in the shadow of his mediocrity. My freelance graphic design business thrived. The surge of adrenaline from orchestrating the great corporate unmasking had, ironically, sharpened my creative edge. Clients loved my newfound boldness, my ability to cut through the noise with clarity and impact. Who knew a cheating husband and a conniving boss could be such a muse? Sarah and Emily remained my steadfast allies, their friendship deepened by shared secrets and triumphant vindication. Sarah, with her dry wit, often joked, "You know, Stella, you should write a book. How to turn a midlife crisis into a corporate takeover." I'd just laugh, acknowledging the absurdity of it all. Emily, ever the romantic, saw it as a story of empowerment. "You showed them, Stella. You showed them that a woman's worth isn't tied to her husband's loyalty." And she was right. The house, once a symbol of my domestic contentment, now felt like a fortress of independence. I redecorated, purging it of anything that reminded me of Baxter, infusing it with my own vibrant, unapologetic style. The kitchen window, once a portal to betrayal, was now just a window, offering a view of a street where I was the master of my own narrative. I even started dating again, cautiously at first, then with a newfound confidence. The men I met were different, more genuine, less prone to the kind of performative masculinity Baxter had embodied. I was no longer looking for a partner to complete me, but a companion to share the adventure. My reflection on the whole ordeal is, naturally, steeped in irony. I learned that sometimes the most devastating blows aren't delivered with a fist, but with a perfectly timed email. That true strength isn't in avoiding pain, but in transforming it into power. And that the best revenge isn't about making someone suffer, it's about making yourself thrive so spectacularly that their suffering becomes an afterthought. Baxter and Joan thought they were writing my story, a tragedy of a betrayed wife. But I simply edited their draft, added a few plot twists, and gave myself a much better ending. The most profound lesson? Never underestimate the quiet woman in the room. She's probably observing, analyzing, and mentally drafting your downfall with impeccable typography. My life had become a testament to the fact that you can lose a husband and gain an empire, even if that empire is just the unshakable belief in your own resilience and a killer sense of humor. So, if you ever find yourself staring at your husband sneaking out of a building across the street, remember this. Sometimes the best way to clean up a dumpster fire is to set off a few well-placed fireworks. And then, you toast to the ashes.